Welcome back to Sip and Talk.
Today, we are asking a really foundational question, I think. It's almost existential for our listeners, especially those in Taiwan who are, living in the shadow of the Chinese Communist Party.
Right.
And the question is this. Do you really believe that just saying, I want to maintain the status quo is enough? We're going to use some real-world facts and data today to show that the answer is, well, probably not.
Absolutely. And when you look at Taiwan's internal landscape, you sort of see two major psychological groups that really need to engage with this. Mm-hmm. On one hand, you have a huge segment of politically apathetic young people. Mm-hmm. Their attitude is basically, why should I even care? This doesn't affect my daily life.
Right. They're focused on rent, on jobs, the latest thing on social media. The threat just feels abstract, far away.
Exactly. And then you have the other group, some of the older generations who are still kind of stuck in this deeply nostalgic, almost mythical idea of an imagined China.
Yeah, a China that they remember, or maybe that they think they remember. They feel sentimental about it, and they believe that somehow unification would bring back some lost cultural connection.
And the difficult reality check we have to deliver today is that the China of memory is, well, it's gone. The one they're dealing with now under current CCP governance is a highly centralized, one-party state.
It's defined by pervasive censorship, absolute political control, and these really sophisticated infiltration efforts across all levels of society.
And that brings us right to the core conflict. The people of Taiwan overwhelmingly want to protect their democratic status quo, their freedoms, their legal system, everything they have right now.
But the CCP's ultimate goal, their non-negotiable goal, is to fundamentally change Taiwan, to absorb it, transform it into a political entity that's completely governed by Beijing.
They don't want the status quo. They want change, but only on their terms.
So our mission today, here on Sip and Talk, is to assure you this is not about fear-mongering. We're not trying to scare anyone.
Not at all. We're just taking an objective look at the international data, at real-world case studies, especially the Hong Kong model, and using everyday scenarios to illustrate why maintaining the status quo isn't a passive choice. It's not something you can just sit back and expect to happen.
No, it requires active awareness, vigilance, and frankly, some serious preparation.
Exactly. So we're going to spend some time unpacking this massive tension between Taiwan's desire for continuity and the CCP's drive for fundamental systemic change.
Okay, let's get into it.
Let's do it.
All right, so let's start where Beijing always starts. The sales pitch for unification. When the CCP talks about bringing Taiwan into the fold, the message is always framed around two huge promises. Peace and prosperity.
That's the shiny brochure, right?
Exactly. They say, stop resisting, accept unification, and we guarantee the threat of war just goes away. And on top of that, you get instant, unfettered access to the biggest market in the world. Sounds pretty good on paper.
It's designed to sound reasonable. The rhetoric is, unification eliminates the conflict risk posed by those seeking Taiwan independence. So, if Taiwan just stops pursuing a distinct political identity, Beijing will stop the military threats. Simple.
But when you actually analyze that logic, it starts to fall apart. We're calling it the threat paradox. It doesn't really sound like a guarantee of peace. It sounds a lot more like extortion.
It does. It's like the schoolyard bully saying, I'll stop punching you if you agree to let me walk home with your lunch money every single day.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy. And our sources use this really powerful Chinese idiom to describe the dynamic. It's guan men dinyu,
which translates to locking the door and beating the dog. And that analogy holds up because you have to ask, where does the current tension even come from?
Right. Who's creating the threat in the first place?
Exactly. The threat of war originates primarily from the CCP's ongoing military coercion. It's their naval exercises, their constant missile tests, and the political red lines they unilaterally draw that create all the instability.
So they're generating the very threat they promise to eliminate if you just give in. It's completely circular logic.
And we have hard data on who's actually investing in escalation. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SEPRI, their 2024 report is very clear.
What does it say?
China's military budget is the second largest in the world. It's estimated at roughly $292 billion US. For context, Taiwan's defense budget, even with recent increases, is around $19 billion.
Wow. That is a massive, massive disparity.
It's enormous.
But it's not just the scale, right? I mean, what is China actually buying with all that money? Is it just defensive stuff?
Not at all. They are aggressively investing in capabilities that are clearly aimed at power projection and control over the Taiwan Strait. Things like advanced anti-accessory denial systems.
And what are those for in plain English?
They're explicitly designed to deter or even destroy U.S. carrier groups.
Okay.
That signals a strategic intent that goes way beyond just, localized deterrence. Taiwan's budget, on the other hand, is focused on defensive asymmetric capabilities. Tools designed to make an invasion prohibitively costly, not to go out and invade other people. The spending really tells the story.
One side is building tools for offense and escalation. The other is building a shield.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's move past the military numbers for a second and look at the real legal danger that unification poses. This is the locking the door part of that idiom. Why is Taiwan's international status so critical right now?
This is probably the single most important insight of this whole discussion. Right now, the Taiwan Strait isn't just a territorial dispute, it's a global geopolitical flashpoint. Any military action by Beijing isn't just a local skirmish. It risks nuclear escalation, it could trigger a global economic collapse because of Taiwan's dominance in semiconductors, and it instantly draws international condemnation, sanctions, and potential military intervention from allies like the U.S. and Japan.
So that complexity is actually Taiwan's biggest strategic leverage. It's the world's own self-interest acting as this massive deterrence shield.
Exactly. And the moment Taiwan is formally unified, the moment it legally becomes a special administrative region of the PRC, that deterrence shield completely collapses.
Explain how that happens so quickly. How is it instantaneous?
Because the issue immediately shifts from a global geopolitical conflict to an internal governance matter, a domestic issue for the PRC. Beijing can then legally invoke the principle of sovereign immunity regarding internal affairs under international law.
So the whole conversation changes.
The entire conversation changes. It goes from the world must intervene to save a democracy to stay out of our domestic administration.
So in that scenario, if the CCP decides to, say, arrest opposition leaders or dismantle the legislature or seize private assets, what can the international community even do?
Very, very little. The world's hands are essentially tied. You might get some strong diplomatic protests, sure, but real international interference, coordinated sanctions, or military support become legally and politically almost impossible to justify.
Because Beijing can just point to the map and say,
this is an internal administrative process. Any interference violates our national sovereignty.
That is the perfection of Guanmendingmiri.
Yeah.
You lock the door, you seal Taiwan off from the international legal system that currently protects it, and then there's absolutely no external check on political suppression.
So leverage is gone. Overnight.
And they already have the legal framework in place to do this, right?
Oh, it's ready to go. Once unified, China's anti-secession law immediately becomes the internal domestic legal basis for prosecuting anyone they perceive as opposition.
So any autonomy that was promised to Taiwan, the two systems part of the deal, is basically worthless.
It becomes instantly conditional. It's revocable the minute Beijing decides that some local political opposition constitutes secessionist activities. The threat doesn't vanish. It just changes from a threat of external invasion to a threat of internal legal prosecution and state suppression.
Under a political system that fundamentally does not recognize individual rights. Okay, let's shift gears to the second big promise, economic prosperity. The classic argument you always hear is Taiwan is small. It needs the scale of the mainland market to survive and thrive.
Right, and that rhetoric appeals heavily to certain business interests, especially in more traditional manufacturing sectors. But the factual rebuttal is, well, it's pretty straightforward.
Which is?
Taiwan's economy is already globally integrated. It's incredibly sophisticated, and it's driven by high-tech industries like semiconductors and advanced computing. Taiwan doesn't need the mainland market to thrive. It's already thriving globally, on its own terms.
Okay, but I have to challenge that a little. China is still the world's factory. It's a massive consumer base. Isn't access to that scale worth the risk for at least some industries?
It might be if you're, say, a shoe factory. But it's not for an advanced democracy that values predictability and the rule of law. The issue is that the Chinese market is never a purely capitalist transaction.
What do you mean?
It comes with extremely high political risk, and that has to be factored into the economic calculation.
Give us an example of that political risk.
Sudden regulatory crackdowns that can wipe out entire industries overnight. Arbitrary asset seizures. Or being forced to adopt political stances, like publicly declaring support for the CCP or recognizing Hong Kong's national security law just to be allowed to sell your product.
So we see this instability all the time, like the sudden politically motivated bans on certain Taiwanese agricultural products or food imports.
Exactly. The market access is conditional on political obedience, and that's precisely why we're seeing this phenomenon of Taisheng, the Taiwanese businesses that operate on the mainland, actively engaged in de-risking strategies.
They're moving their supply chains.
They're moving supply chains, shifting production to Vietnam, to Mexico, even back to Taiwan. The people with the most intimate first-hand knowledge of the mainland system are choosing security and predictability over sheer market scale.
If the people who know the system best are leaving, that tells you everything you need to know about the long-term economic promise.
It really does. And then just look at the raw prosperity numbers. We mentioned Taiwan's GDP per capita is around $34,060.
And mainland China's?
It's $13,314.
So Taiwan's is 2.5 times higher. You're being asked to unify with an economy that, on a per-person basis, is significantly less prosperous.
And beyond that, Taiwan's economic strength comes from its independent right to negotiate its own trade deals, its cutting-edge innovation ecosystem, and its incredibly robust, predictable legal and intellectual property framework.
The very things that Western partners rely on.
Absolutely. Unification would compromise all of those advantages. It would subject them to a system that's proven to be volatile, politically controlled, and often hostile to intellectual property rights. The rational, purely economic decision is overwhelmingly to protect the current superior structure.
So if Beijing's sales pitch is the promise, then I guess Hong Kong is the product demonstration.
It is. It was supposed to be the shining example of one country, two systems for 50 years. And now it's the most undeniable warning sign for Taiwan.
And we're going to put aside the emotional stories for a minute and just focus purely on the objective, quantifiable data that shows the systemic collapse there since the 2020 national security law was imposed.
The speed and the severity of Hong Kong's political regression. It provides the empirical data that Taiwan really needs to look at.
Yeah.
We can quantify exactly what that promised peace and prosperity actually costs in terms of freedom and human capital.
Okay, so let's start with civil liberties and political rights. We can use the Freedom House scores for that, right? They track the health of democratic institutions.
We can. And the shift is not incremental. It is, as you said earlier, catastrophic.
So let's set a baseline. What was Hong Kong like right before the national security law?
In 2019, Hong Kong was rated 60 out of 100. It was categorized as partly free. Its score for political rights was 23 out of 40. There was a functioning, if increasingly constrained, degree of democratic participation.
And after the NSL was implemented, what did those numbers look like by, say, 2024?
The score plummeted to 42 out of 100. That drop put Hong Kong squarely into the category of not free.
Wow.
And specifically, political rights dropped from 23 all the way down to a mere 10 out of 40. This isn't just, tightening the screws a bit. This is the systematic dismantling of political life.
And what does that steep drop actually mean for the average person living in Hong Kong? What does that feel like?
It translates into the immediate suppression of any dissent. Over 10,000 arrests have been reported related to the 2019 protests. You have massive changes to the electoral processes that basically ensure only pro-Beijing candidates can even stand for office.
So the civic space is just gone?
It's been fundamentally closed down, mirroring the mainland's control model. The system that was partly free is now categorically not free.
And the collapse of press freedom is maybe the most visible and the most rapid sign of this systemic failure.
It is stunning. We use the Reporters Without Borders, or RSF, World Press Freedom Index, to track this. In 2019, Hong Kong ranked 73rd globally. That was a pretty decent ranking in the Asian region.
And on the latest rankings.
Hong Kong has plunged dramatically. It's now hovering around the 135th to 140th position globally. It's now categorized as very severe.
And Taiwan, for comparison.
Taiwan maintains a strong position at 27th. This is no longer a gap, it's a chasm.
And that number is rooted in, I assume, the closure of major independent news outlets?
Absolutely. The immediate shutdown of prominent independent media like Apple Daily and Stan News sent a chilling signal to everyone. But the real destruction, the insidious part, is the self-censorship.
Right.
Internal surveys show that up to 65% of local journalists admit they now intentionally avoid sensitive topics, anything related to the mainland or state security. So citizens aren't just losing their independent news sources. The news sources that are left are actively hiding inconvenient truths.
And this control extends online, too, which is so critical for Taiwanese youth who live on global digital platforms.
Correct. The Freedom House Internet score dropped from 68, which was free, down to 48, partly free. We're seeing more censorship, the blocking of news sites that are critical of Beijing, and this ongoing creeping process of adopting mainland-style digital surveillance.
So for Taiwan, where unrestricted access to global internet culture is central to youth life, this represents an immediate, tangible loss of daily freedom.
It's not abstract at all. It's very real.
Okay. This next area is a little more nuanced because you still have a lot of international law firms operating in Hong Kong, and sometimes the overall rule of law rankings don't look entirely disastrous. So how do we break down the internal rot here?
This is where you have to look past the single overall number. The World Justice Project's Rule of Law Index still ranks Hong Kong relatively high, maybe 23rd globally. But a high rank doesn't mean it's the same system it used to be.
So where do we look to see the systemic failure?
You have to look at the internal component scores. The really significant declines are all clustered in two critical categories: fundamental rights and constraints on government powers. This is the difference between a legal system that ensures your commercial contracts are honored and a legal system that ensures the state cannot arbitrarily violate your personal rights.
So the system is still efficient for business, but it's no longer protective of the citizen against the state.
Exactly. The legal framework has been fundamentally repositioned. It no longer exists primarily to restrain government overreach or guarantee the rights of the individual. Instead, the overriding constitutional priority is now state security and central political stability. It's the politicization of justice.
And the most profound alarm bell came from a kind of unexpected source, right? An economic watchdog.
The Heritage Foundation. They track global economic freedom, and in a truly powerful symbolic move, they excluded Hong Kong from their Economic Freedom Index entirely.
That's not a warning. That's a declaration that its economic status has been compromised. Why did they do that?
They explicitly stated that Hong Kong no longer possessed sufficient judicial independence or economic autonomy to be considered a separate economic entity from Beijing. When a foundation that is dedicated to free market principles says your legal system is too compromised to even be measured for its freedom anymore, it signals that the fundamental contract between capital and government predictability and protection has been broken.
That has to be the single biggest red flag for Taiwan, whose entire economic success is built on that very predictability.
It is. And even the promised economic stability of the one country, two systems model is proving to be a casualty of this political control.
How so?
Well, while Hong Kong is still a wealthy city, its growth trajectory has been crippled by all this uncertainty. Before 2019, the average annual GDP growth was around 3.5%. Post-NSL, we're seeing averages closer to 1.4%. Uncertainty is just toxic to high-level economic activity.
And where uncertainty goes, money follows, usually out the door.
We've seen massive capital flight, a net outflow estimated at over $100 billion between 2020 and 2023. Capital requires stability, and when the rule of law becomes subservient to political dictates, capital will always seek safer harbors.
But the long-term structural damage isn't just the money leaving, is it? It's the people leaving.
The human capital drain is the most devastating long-term hit. Between 2020 and 2022 alone, over 140,000 professional and middle-class residents left the territory.
Wow.
Many use the BNO visa route to the UK. And these are the educated, highly skilled professionals, the innovators, the teachers, the business managers. This exodus represents a massive structural hit to Hong Kong's competitiveness, its tax base, and its overall creative dynamism.
It proves that when forced to choose, the best and brightest will choose freedom and predictability over stability under authoritarian control.
It's a clear choice they're making.
Okay, so if Hong Kong proves that unification means losing your freedom, losing international deterrence, and losing your best people, we have to now directly compare the system Taiwan is being asked to trade away against the system Beijing offers.
Right. This becomes a question of pure measurable rationality. Taiwan is being asked to exchange an existing, globally recognized superior product for a demonstrably inferior, high-risk alternative.
So let's just look at the metrics where Taiwan already achieves everything the CCP promises, but better and with freedom intact.
Let's start with the political system. It's a philosophical comparison, but it's also measurable. We can start with the EIU Democracy Index.
Okay, where does Taiwan stand on that global index?
Taiwan is consistently ranked as a full democracy. It places around 10th or 12th globally, and critically, number 1 in all of Asia.
Number 1 in Asia.
The system is defined by institutional stability, robust civil liberties, and smooth transitions of power achieved through regular, competitive, multi-party elections.
And the system they're being asked to join.
Mainland China ranks around 148th globally. It's categorized as an authoritarian regime. The state structure lacks competitive elections, lacks multi-party accountability, and power transition is opaque and dictated by a single ruling body.
And we see that difference reflected immediately in the Freedom House scores we were talking about earlier.
Absolutely. Taiwan scores a 94 out of 100, designated free. It has near-perfect scores in political rights and high scores in civil liberties. There are also regional leaders on social rights, like being the first in Asia to legalize same-sex marriage.
Which shows a functioning, evolving democracy that prioritizes individual liberties.
Right. China, meanwhile, scores a 9 out of 100. Not free. And it's characterized by major ongoing human rights abuses. The contrast is just definitive. Why would anyone trade a 94 for a 9?
That's a good question. Let's move to the economy. Economic superiority and resilience.
We already hit the GDP per capita numbers. Taiwan at over $34,000, China at just over $13,000. But let's look beyond that, at structural competitiveness.
Okay. Where does Taiwan stand against its regional and global peers in overall economic health?
The IMD World Competitiveness Report for 2025 is incredibly instructive. Taiwan ranks 6th globally overall. But listen to this detail. It ranks first among all economies with populations over 20 million. First. This means the government is highly efficient, the business environment is conducive to innovation, and the workforce is skilled and productive.
So Taiwan isn't just wealthy on a per-person basis. It is structurally optimized and globally competitive at the highest level.
It's a global powerhouse.
Yeah.
And we have to contrast Taiwan again with Hong Kong's fate regarding legal protection. The Heritage Foundation, which ranks economic freedom, consistently puts Taiwan in the top 5 globally.
And what do they praise it for?
Its predictable and reliable legal system and its strong protection of property rights. That is the necessary foundation for high-tech success.
So Taiwan already has the economic security and predictability that its sophisticated industries need, and it's provided by an independent legal framework. Losing that framework, as Hong Kong did, would undermine the entire economic model.
It's the bedrock of their success.
Okay, what about the media and information environment?
The quality of information a population receives fundamentally defines the health of its democracy. And the difference here is, again, just stark.
Taiwan's media environment, while it can be polarized sometimes, is certainly diverse and free.
The RSF Press Freedom Index ranks Taiwan 27th globally, categorized as satisfactory. There's no state censorship, the media is diverse, and the right to criticize the government is sacrosanct. This allows for open debate and, crucially, for accountability.
And the alternative system?
China remains near the very bottom, around 172nd. It's explicitly labeled the world's largest jailer of journalists. They operate the Great Firewall, maintain absolute state control over the narrative, and aggressively export that censorship model.
So if unification were to happen, Taiwan's open information ecosystem, which is critical for both innovation and democratic functioning, would instantly become subject to those state controls.
Gone. When you synthesize all of this data, the political scores, the economic rankings, the media freedom indices, the conclusion is just inescapable. Taiwan is a world-class system being asked to trade down for a demonstrably inferior one.
So the trade offer is, give up your 94 out of 100 democracy, your $34,000 per capita economy, and your top 5 economic freedom ranking. In exchange for a system that scores a 9 out of 100, has a volatile and politically controlled economy, and is proven to compromise on every single promised autonomy, as Hong Kong clearly illustrates.
The only rational response, backed by every single international standard, is a rejection of that deal. The democratic status quo isn't just a preference. It is the most logical choice based on measurable, quantifiable success.
Okay, so winning the international argument is one thing, but the critical challenge for Taiwan is internal convincing their own people that this threat is real and that it's immediate. We have to address the psychological barriers for both the young and the old.
Right. You can't just throw data at these groups and expect it to stick. You have to personalize the consequences. You can't lecture a young person out of apathy, and you can't erase a traditionalist nostalgia with, a dry political fact sheet.
Let's start with the political apathy of Taiwanese youth, the doesn't affect me crowd.
As we noted, this group suffers from what psychologists call high psychological distance. Geopolitics feels like a distant thunderstorm when you're focused on immediate pressures. Rent, job competition, the daily grind. We have to bridge that distance with tangible personal costs.
Okay, let's start with what defines their generation. the digital landscape. What do they stand to lose immediately on day one?
Digital freedom. This is the easiest concept to personalize. Ask them to imagine life without Google, without uncensored YouTube or global social media like Instagram and X, unless they want to risk using an illegal VPN.
So their favorite content creators, their gaming servers,
their ability to participate in global digital culture, all of it, would instantly become subject to the scrutiny and censorship of the Great Firewall. The internet that they know, that they live on, would vanish overnight. And it's not just political, it's cultural and recreational censorship.
That is an immediate, palpable loss of identity and lifestyle. Okay, now let's talk jobs, which is probably their biggest daily stressor. Taiwan's high-tech job market is driven by global supply chains, often tied to Western partners.
And if Taiwan loses its sovereign standing and is absorbed, it would very likely become subject to the same aggressive Western sanctions that are aimed at containing Beijing. That semiconductor advantage, the source of all those high-wage, high-tech jobs, would be fundamentally compromised.
And we need to introduce this concept of Neijing. Can you explain that term clearly?
Sure. Neijing, or involution, describes this brutally competitive, suffocating job market that's common in state capitalist systems. Imagine you're trying to climb a corporate ladder, but instead of the ladder going up, everyone is just pushing harder and faster to stay on the same rung.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. The job market in mainland China is often dominated by political connections, guangxi and state approval, not pure meritocracy.
So for the Taiwanese youth, the message is this. Losing sovereignty means trading a creative, merit-based economy that leads the world for a state-controlled, politically constrained, involuted environment where your opportunity is defined by who you know, not what you can achieve.
And finally, we have to frame rights as insurance. Civil liberties, the right to protest, the right to criticize the president, to form a union, these shouldn't be taught as abstract political theory. They should be seen as the essential, non-negotiable insurance policy that protects your most basic personal rights, including your property.
Can you give a clear property example?
Sure. Let's say the local government decides they need your family's land for a new state-owned development project. In Taiwan, you can appeal to an independent judiciary. Your rights are enshrined in law. Under an authoritarian system, if the local party secretary or the state apparatus wants your property, there is no higher legal authority to protect you. Your democratic rights are the only thing standing between you and the arbitrary power of the state. It's pure self-preservation.
Okay, so that's the youth. Now for the other group, which is maybe more delicate. The older traditionalists, the ones with the imagined China in their minds.
Right. This group holds these really emotional, deeply rooted attachments to the idea of China, or the historical Republic of China heritage. And they often minimize the threat because they're experiencing a strong sense of cognitive dissonance.
Their cognitive barrier is strong because their idealized China is based on a memory, a cultural or traditional entity that has been structurally obsolete since the CCP took power in 1949.
So we need to especially address this by contrasting the ROC's core philosophical values with the CCP's reality. The ideological clash is just fundamental.
How so?
The ROC Constitution is rooted in the three principles of the people, in the rule of law and in freedom. The CCP is explicitly a Marxist-Leninist, anti-democratic, authoritarian state. These two systems are philosophically irreconcilable. They can't coexist.
And we have to highlight the betrayal of the rule of law, which is something this generation values so deeply. They respect Fatong, right? Legal tradition and constitutional continuity.
They do. And yet modern China operates under Ren Z, which means rule by man, where the Communist Party is the supreme authority, explicitly above the law. We need to challenge their faith in the legal system directly.
So the question to them is,
if you value tradition and property rights, who protects those rights when the local party secretary is the highest legal authority and can overrule any judge? The rule of law in China is a tool of the state, not a shield for the citizen.
So you can use the example of the Taishang assets again, but link it directly to their value of legal tradition.
Exactly. Taishang, who invested heavily in the mainland, often saw their assets arbitrarily seized or regulated out of existence the moment they fell out of political favor. The fact that traditionalists value Fatong means they should be terrified of a system where property rights are secondary to the party's political needs.
Their own traditional cultural values actually demand a system of laws, not a system run by a party.
Precisely. And finally, you have to circle back to international status. What does unification mean for the ROC identity they cherish so much? We have to stress that the ROC, as a separate entity operating in Taiwan, is what currently gives the island international leverage and the potential for support, like what we saw with Ukraine. Unification makes Taiwan an internal affair, leading to the kind of international abandonment we saw with Hong Kong.
So their nostalgia for a stable, unified Chinese past is actually blinding them to the reality that the current CCP system would crush the very traditions, legal institutions, and political freedoms that the ROC identity is supposed to represent.
That's the painful paradox they have to confront.
So what's the ultimate takeaway here for everyone in Taiwan? It seems to be that apathy or a passive defense is just no defense at all.
The core message is that the choice for the Taiwanese people is not a comforting change or stay the same. The real choice is be changed by Beijing or actively defend your current superior system.
The status quo isn't some static, safe place. It's a constant, dynamic defensive effort that requires continuous engagement.
Absolutely. We need to reiterate how the CCP is actively eroding the status quo every single day, even without a formal declaration of war. They use military gray zone tactics like crossing the median line constantly. They use economic coercion like sudden import bans. And they have these relentless efforts to strip away Taiwan's diplomatic allies.
So the status quo, as they know it, is bleeding out slowly.
And passive indifference only speeds up the transfusion into the CCP system. Awareness and preparation are the only forms of defense that actually matter.
That was a deep and I think really necessary dive into the realities facing Taiwan. The main conclusion, backed by every data set we reviewed today, is that the supposed benefits of unification, peace, and prosperity are nothing more than political bait. They mask the irreversible cost of losing freedom, losing international deterrence, and losing a superior economic and legal system. The systemic failure we've documented in Hong Kong is proof positive of that cost.
And we really encourage you, our listeners, to remember that this entire discussion is grounded in objective facts and hard data from neutral international organizations, the EIU, RSF, WJP, FPRI, the Heritage Foundation. We urge you to continue questioning assumptions and applying critical thought to all the information you receive, regardless of where it comes from.
Exactly. We're committed to impartially exploring the facts of governance and the consequences of systemic change. We are not here to criticize or moralize against any nation or any people, but merely to objectively explore the facts on the ground.
And if this analysis resonated with you and you want to ensure you never miss an objective breakdown of complex global issues, please make sure you hit that subscribe button for the Sip and Talk podcast.
And if you need a break after all that heavy analysis, make sure you check out our old friend Mickey's YouTube channel, Mickytolife. It's a great place to find some fun travel vlogs and good humor to balance out all the geopolitics.
We'll see you next time.